World Wrestling Federation.
The World Wrestling Federation proudly presents WrestleMania!
WrestleMania 6 would open with a triple threat match, with James Lionheart defending the Intercontinental title against Franco Sanchez and Bruce Tyler. As Franco Sanchez missed his frog splash attack off the top rope, Bruce Tyler would capitalize with a pinning suplex against James Lionheart, winning the Intercontinental title for a third time. Donald the Clown's accomplice and women's champion Beth would defend the title against newcomer Dogma.
I wanted to show this bitch that we ain't gonna have clowns as champions, and that night I showed just why I am the greatest women's champion of all time.
Dogma would indeed prove herself that night, defeating Beth and becoming the WWF Women's Champion for her first time. Just one night after winning the tag team titles from the Superflies at Royal Rumble, Team Money would lose the titles against the Nation of Domination on Monday Night Raw. At WrestleMania 6, the reunited team of Crusher and Chains, formerly known as Chains and Steel in the early 90s, would take on the new tag team champions. The challengers would deliver the pain and punishment to their opponents, successfully defeating Nation of Domination members Azrael Aries and Chris Bison to become two-time WWF Tag Team Champions. As the Superflies had disbanded after their tag team title loss, Vice Flash would return to singles competition and go against his former friend and Nation of Domination leader, Sergeant John Gilbert. As the two would settle this rivalry once and for all, Sergeant Gilbert's Nation of Domination members would attempt to interfere in typical fashion. Vice Vincent would deflect this interference, and Father Bruiser would make his return, attacking Gilbert from behind with a baseball bat. Vice Flash would finish off his opponent and claim the victory. In the next match, the newly formed team of Owen Rocker and the Tax Taker, with Bobby Corn as their manager, would defeat their opponents, the Masked Ninja and Hannibal, in a tag team match. The ongoing rivalry between Aaron Styles and Jacob Cassidy would continue to escalate throughout the previous months and would now face each other for the United States Championship. As the match went on, the intensity between the two wrestlers grew. They exchanged powerful blows, each trying to gain the upper hand. Jacob managed to lift Aaron up and into the torture rack, forcing Aaron's Styles to tap out. This would be Jacob Cassidy's fourth time as the United States champion. The Monster will seek revenge against Angel after he had interfered in his match against the Masked Man, causing him to lose at the previous month's Royal Rumble. The Monster would waste no time, as he would dominate his opponent rather quickly into the match, finishing him off with the Monster Slam and gaining the pinfall victory. In the weeks leading up to WrestleMania 6, Dean Cooper would appear on Monday Night Raw and announce his retirement. Rick Deal would make his way into the ring to farewell his former rival. Within minutes, the two would begin to talk trash to each other as past tensions would begin to resurface. John Laurinaitis would enter the stage area and propose one last match between the two legends at WrestleMania 6. Both superstars would accept. The two superstars first competed against each other at the 1990 Superstars event, where Rick Deal would successfully defend the WWF title. Over a year later, Dean Cooper would once again have the opportunity to face the WWF champion, Rick Deal, at the first ever WrestleMania in 1991. Only this time, Dean Cooper would beat Rick Deal and win the WWF title. At WrestleMania 2, the two would once again square off. This time, there would be no title belts on the line. This would be personal. The two superstars would hold a lot more resilience and deliver more aggression than ever before. Rick Deal would eventually deliver the final blow and win the match. Rick Deal and Dean Cooper would now go head-to-head for a final time in a no-disqualification match. Much like their previous encounters, the two superstars would be determined to deliver and endure as much pain as possible. Rick Deal would narrowly kick out of Dean Cooper's super kick, then deliver the deal breaker to finish off his opponent once and for all.
It wasn't so much as a victory to me as many would have thought. To me, this was a big chapter closing both of our careers. And to see the end of that, it honestly made me sad. He was my greatest rival, but to this day, he remains as one of my closest friends.
To have my last match against the legend himself, despite our history or who came out on top, was the best way I could have possibly ended my career. Now that I'm retired, I'm training my younger brother Brian to join the new generation of superstars to come.
In the weeks leading up to WrestleMania 6, the Masked Man would defeat Dean Cooper for the WWF title. After this defeat, the Masked Man would finally reveal his identity to be none other than Blake Saturn.
So it turned out Blake Saturn was wrestling in both companies this whole time, in RFW as himself and in the WWF as the Masked Man. Wow, even I wasn't in on that.
My suspicions proved to be correct. This was Tony Cheese trying to stir the pot and sabotage the WWF.
We feared Blake Saturn would take the heavyweight title to RFW if we fired him. So we just let this play out and continued to have him defend the WWF title against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 6. Also, the fans really wanted to see this match.
In a radio interview with Tony Cheese shortly before WrestleMania 6, he would claim to have never allowed any of his contracted RFW superstars to ever enter the WWF without prior approval from both companies. He would also deny allegations that he was attempting to disrupt business in the WWF.
Okay, so Tony, we just have to ask you, and I'm sure you saw this question coming, but what's the deal with Blake Saturn wrestling for your company and the WWF at the same time?
RFW don't allow contracted wrestlers to compete in other organizations without prior approval from both companies.
Okay, and
as far as RFW is concerned, Blake Saturn has been fired, and that's it. End of story.
So you saying the WWF agreed to this? Are you trying to disrupt business in the WWF by getting your RFW roster
Look, I just said end of story. And no, I'm not trying to disrupt anyone's business. This interview is over. You fucking motherfucker. You told me there would be no questions about this, and you go ahead and do it anyway? No, fuck you, Arnie. Fuck you.
Strange things were happening, man. I was still in RFW at the time, and we all had to sign a non-disclosure agreement when it came to talking about what had just happened with Blake. Tony Cheese was barely around, and he would never even return my phone calls. The RFW locker room was so quiet, and the Masked Man revealing to be Blake Saturn was just the very beginning.
In the main event at WrestleMania 6, Blake Saturn would defend the WWF title against the 1996 Royal Rumble winner and two-time former WWF champion, Bret the Hitman Hart.
We had spotted a few RFW superstars in the audience, and we feared they were going to somehow disrupt this match. We had about 20 WWF superstars on standby just behind the entrance, and security was noticeably enhanced, just in case.
I was there in the audience. We were given tickets and told to go there, not speak with anyone, and just watch the event until it finished. For what reason exactly? Well, I don't know. I couldn't figure that out, but we were paid shitloads to do this. Once again, we all had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This would now become standard when instructed to do anything with the WWF.
No disruptions would occur throughout the match, and Bret Hart would defeat Blake Saturn via submission, winning the WWF title for his third time.
It felt like this match and my title win were overshadowed by this whole RFW thing happening. I would even hear RFW chants in the audience as I celebrated my victory.
Immediately after this match, Blake Saturn would be fired by the WWF and escorted out of the arena by local police. Shortly after WrestleMania 6, the WWF would recruit 2 new wrestlers directly from RFW: Sting and the Maniac.
I had advised against hiring the Maniac due to his violent reputation in RFW, but John wanted to show RFW that he won't be intimidated and that we still hold the power.
And now, Milton Bradley Karate Fighters presents WWF in Your House. It's time.
At the next pay-per-view event on the 26th of May, 1996, Slap Crash, the Maniac would go one-on-one with Azrael Aries. The Maniac would carry on his reputation throughout the match, putting Azrael Aries through an announce table and then attacking the referee, leaving himself to be disqualified. In the next match, Crusher and Chains defend the tag team titles against the Masked Ninjas. Just as the challengers would begin to gain the momentum, Hannibal would unexpectedly betray his partner, leaving the Masked Ninja to be pinned and the tag team champions to retain their titles. Intercontinental champion Bruce Tyler would defend his title against Aaron Styles, who would attack the champion from behind during his entrance. The tension was strong as these 2 fierce competitors face off in the center of the ring, each determined to emerge victorious and showcase their incredible amateur wrestling styles. While the referee had his back turned, Aaron would illegally use brass knuckles to knock out his opponent, gaining the pinfall victory to become the Intercontinental Champion for his first time. Jacob Cassidy would defend the United States title against the 1995 King of the Ring winner, Owen Rocker. The 2 technical and agile wrestlers darted across the ring, executing dazzling flips, body slams and spins that left the audience in awe. Unfortunately for the champion, Owen would resort to getting assistance from the tax taker, using a steel chair to gain the pinfall victory, winning the United States title for his first time. Donald the Clown would go head-to-head with the Monster in an Extreme Rules match. The Monster would waste no time with his opponent, delivering brutal attacks with the steel chair outside the ring. Donald the Clown would recover and attempt to bring down the Monster with a variety of weapons. However, the Monster would finally end the match after lighting a table on fire and attempting to suplex his opponent through it. Luckily for Donald, he would narrowly miss, but the ring would end up collapsing due to excessive weight being slammed down. The Monster would win the match via technical knockout. This would be Donald the Clown's last match, as he was once again arrested for the kidnapping of Chris Hammer. Only this time, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence with no bail. He would also be fired from the WWF and never return. In the next match, Vice Flash would face Franco Sanchez in a one-on-one match. As the action had intensified throughout the match, both men begin to trade phenomenal attacks and near falls, each trying to outmaneuver the other. While the referee had his back turned, RFW wrestler Mad Max would unexpectedly emerge to the ring with a baseball bat, beating up Vice Flash and allowing Franco Sanchez to gain the pinfall victory. The 2 would appear to have been in a partnership before the match.
Well, this was it. This was the first official RFW invasion in the WWF. This is where it would all begin to unfold.
We had Mad Max escorted out of the arena immediately, and we continued the show as normal. I didn't want to assume straight away that this was the work of RFW, and possibly Mad Max just going rogue.
So Franco, why did Mad Max help you out at last night's Slap Crash event? Are you somehow involved with RFW?
I didn't know he was ever appearing on WWF television. He is a good friend of mine and we go way back, and I was just really happy to see him at the time.
Okay, but like, why was he there?
Why he was there? He said he wasn't allowed to explain, and I just respected that.
On Monday Night Raw, just weeks leading up to Slap Crash, Sergeant John Gilbert's speech would suddenly be interrupted by the second newly recruited superstar from RFW, Sting.
I had been noticing Sting's popularity increase in RFW over the years. Probably one of the reasons we were now losing in television ratings, to be perfectly honest. The fans absolutely loved him, so we made him a great offer and he happily accepted.
I also strongly advised against hiring Sting, especially for the amount of money offered. Sting was good, but just not WWF championship material in my eyes. But of course, to John, this was more about sending another message to RFW. John is obviously the owner of this company, and as long as he's around, he can do as he pleases.
Sting would make his first WWF pay-per-view appearance against the Nation of Domination leader at the time, Sergeant John Gilbert.
Gilbert seriously injured Sting at an RFW pay-per-view event in '93, back when Sting and I were a team. This is why Sting wanted revenge against him. Sting wasn't the same person I once knew in RFW. He became very quiet. He suddenly dressed and acted differently, and just wouldn't talk to anybody in the locker room, including me.
As the two wrestlers would get into action, the roar of the crowd and the sheer excitement from the fans would shake the arena. Both competitors would show no resistance to one another, going back and forth while attempting to gain control. Sting would deliver his signature inverted DDT and would proceed to lock in the Scorpion Deathlock submission move, making Sergeant John Gilbert tap out and claiming the victory. In the main event that night, Bret the Hitman Hart would defend his newly claimed WWF title against the #1 contender, James Lion Hart.
My first ever WWF title match against one of the greatest champions, Bret Hart. Having lost the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania 6, I was honored to be featured in the main event.
Both superstars would appear to be evenly matched, as they would deliver each move with precision and great impact. While their stamina would prove to be incredibly abundant, their strength would slowly deplete as the match went past the 20-minute mark, with both Bret Hart and James Lion Hart facing a great amount of near falls and reversals to one another. Bret Hart would eventually knock the challenger down and run straight to his feet to apply the sharpshooter for a final time. James Lion Hart would visibly tolerate a great amount of pain as he was locked in the sharpshooter for nearly 3 minutes. Eventually, the challenger would tap out, leaving Bret Hart to retain the WWF Championship that night.
I had a choice. Either hold on and hope I can break out of this, or risk permanent injury and never wrestle again. As wrong as that choice felt in that very moment, I know it was the best thing I could do. I would rather lose an opportunity, rather than never have an opportunity ever again. Until next time, Bret, I will train harder and be more prepared for our next match.
Feel like being one of the cool kids? Want that girl to finally notice you? Or do you need a good disguise to wear for when you rob your next liquor store? Want those bullies to finally stop picking on you? Get your official WWF merchandise now. Only available at WWFshop.com. Clothing may contain traces of dead cockroaches, mice, bats, snake venom, World War II veterans, Ebola, AIDS, plutonium, and human feces.
After the Slap Crash event, John Laurinaitis would receive a phone call from an anonymous individual, a phone call that will change this company as it currently stands, and possibly forever.
This anonymous person called me at around midnight, and they advised that I need to do everything they instruct, or else I'll face serious consequences. I thought it was a prank call, so I hung up the phone and went to bed.
The next day, we went to the WWF headquarters to begin preparations for the Monday Night Raw event. only to find we'd been broken into.
There was graffiti everywhere with the words "Obey" all over the place. Every floor and every room was absolutely trashed. The only thing that seemed to remain untouched was the WWF roster and payroll filing facility, where we found a note with the word "Obey." After the police had finished their crime scene report, we looked in the roster filing system to make sure everything remained untouched, only to find that Mad Max had been added to our WWF roster and payroll with a substantial amount of pay. Just as I was about to call the police again, I received another phone call from the same anonymous person as the night before. This is when the threat I thought was a joke had now turned into serious blackmail. With the damage that could potentially be done to myself and the company, I now have to follow direct orders from this anonymous person. And I was also told not to contact Tony Cheese or anybody affiliated with RFW. I've chosen not to press charges or go to the police, and unfortunately, I can't really go into any further detail.
We would obviously keep Mad Max on the payroll and book him at our next King of the Ring event. Just hours before King of the Ring 6, we would receive our next set of instructions from the anonymous individual.
We were told that there would be an RFW invasion, and if we dared to intervene, the anonymous person would execute their threats. We had to keep this quiet. We didn't want to stir panic in the locker room or deal with this publicly yet.
Welcome everyone to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the site of the 1996 WWF King of the Ring.
On the 30th of July, 1996, the King of the Ring 6 event would open with the two semi-final matches. Aaron Styles would defeat Vice Flash via pinfall, and Jacob Cassidy had defeated newcomer Mad Max via submission. Leaving Aaron Styles to face his old friend and rival, Jacob Cassidy, later that night in the King of the Ring finals match. After being betrayed by Hannibal at the Slap Crash event, the Masked Ninja would seek revenge against his former teammate. As the two high flyers would battle it out, RFW wrestler Kim Hwang would make a surprise return to the WWF, attacking Hannibal and the Masked Ninja.
We thought this was it. This was the RFW invasion the blackmailer was referring to. We considered this no harm done, as the fans in attendance were going wild with applause.
我的翻译打电话给我，说我需要去 WWF 并在忍者人和汉尼拔的比赛中攻击他们。我以为我会在这之后回到 RFW， 但他们要求我留在 WWF。我不知道为什么。
In the next match, Crusher and Chains would defend their tag team titles against Owen Rocker and the Tax Taker. Unfortunately for the champions, their title reign would be cut short. Owen Rocker would make the final move, successfully pinning their opponent and winning the WWF Tag Team Championship belt with the Tax Taker for their first and only time as a team. The Maniac would go against the recently returned Father Bruiser in a one-on-one exhibition match. As the two giants would attempt to destroy each other with extreme force, the Maniac would make his opponent bleed after putting him through the announce table. The Maniac would then deliver the final move from the top rope, claiming the victory that night. After the match, the Maniac would once again uphold his reputation, like his name suggests, and he would perform a diving attack from the top rope, putting Father Bruiser through two tables simultaneously.
I had only just recently returned, and luckily I wasn't seriously injured. Honestly, after this match, I never wanted to wrestle this motherfucker ever again.
In the next match, Sergeant John Gilbert would once again face Sting, only this time in a no disqualification match. As Sting had beaten Sergeant Gilbert at the previous pay-per-view event, his fellow Nation of Domination members would interrupt the match to ensure this defeat wouldn't happen again. Sting would deflect all disruptions and once again gain the victory, making his opponent tap out to the Scorpion Deathlock. Bret the Hitman Hart would defend the WWF title against the Monster. The champion would struggle against his opponent throughout most of this match, as the monster's sheer force and strength would keep him at an advantage and one step closer to victory. As Bret Hart would begin to fight back and gain momentum, the referee would accidentally get knocked out. The Maniac would then enter the ring with a steel chair, which the monster would use to knock out his opponent. The monster would follow through with a devastating chokeslam through the announce table and successfully pin Bret Hart, becoming the WWF champion for a second time. After the match, the Maniac would hand the WWF title belt to the new champion, with the two appearing to have now formed a deadly alliance. In the King of the Ring finals match, Intercontinental Champion Aaron Styles would once again make his way to the ring.
Days before this event, I received a fax from RFW officials with a set of obscure instructions. I thought this was a fucking prank being played on me. I tried calling Tony Cheese, and once again, he would not answer or return any of my phone calls. I spoke to their head office, and they advised in order to keep my job, I need to do exactly as the instructions said. I had been instructed to make an appearance at this King of the Ring event and to attack one of the tournament finalists before the last match. I thought, okay, surely they're not sending their RFW champion to now work at the WWF, so I thought I'll do this and come back at the next RFW show like nothing happened. I got building access to the event, and I was told to wait in a room all night. I couldn't leave or even make a fucking phone call. All I could do was wait for the King of the Ring finals match and then choose who I was going to attack.
As Jacob Cassidy would make his way through the backstage area, he would suddenly get attacked by RFW champion Lance Starr.
This was insane. Not only another RFW wrestler invading the show, but the RFW heavyweight champion. We were all watching backstage, and we were just speechless.
Naturally, I went for that piece of shit, Jacob Cassidy. Ever since he stole the United States title belt back in the day, I've just always hated that man. So when he was in close proximity, they opened the door, gave me a baseball bat, and I made my move.
It was obvious Jacob would now have to forfeit the match, and I issued an open challenge to anyone willing to face me in the finals. I seriously didn't think anybody worthy would actually accept my challenge.
To everyone's surprise, Chuck Diamond would make his return to the WWF, accepting Aaron's challenge.
Was this another RFW invasion, and was this planned all along with Lance? Or is Chuck Diamond now contracted by the WWF? Nobody knew what was going on.
So, like everyone else arriving from RFW, I was given a set of instructions and had to wait in a room backstage until I was eventually called out. Even though Aaron issued the challenge, he would have been forced to face me anyway, as the plan for me was to compete in the King of the Ring finals and win.
Once Chuck Diamond entered the ring, the King of the Ring finals match would begin. The match was a back-and-forth battle, with both wrestlers giving it their all. Aaron Styles would use his amateur wrestling background to his advantage, and Chuck Diamond would land a series of high-flying moves. Chuck would eventually catch his opponent off guard and lock in his Diamond Tamer submission move. Aaron Styles would then tap out, leaving Chuck Diamond to become the King of the Ring for a second time in his career.
As great as it was winning the King of the Ring tournament again, I really just wanted to return to RFW after that. But they've told me I need to remain here.
As the show closes, mixed crowd reactions could be clearly heard. While many people were not so welcoming to Chuck Diamond winning the King of the Ring, others could be heard chanting RFW.
We had no prior knowledge of these RFW wrestlers appearing at King of the Ring. We didn't even know which RFW wrestlers were in the backstage area, or how many there were throughout the night. Good Lord, man, it was getting out of control.
Kim Hwang's attack, Lance's attack on Jacob, and Chuck's return was all one big scheme. And now being forced to add these 3 RFW wrestlers to our payroll, it was at this point that I realized I'm losing control of my own company.
Interestingly enough, television ratings began to skyrocket the next night. It's as if this anonymous blackmailer is attempting to work in our favor.
Not only would television ratings begin to rise in the WWF, but the fans would begin to sense something out of the ordinary is happening within the company and RFW, as internet forums would begin to explode.
Fans on the internet had their theories. Radio shows kept harassing me to get an interview. The employees and shareholders were visibly upset. We didn't know what was going to happen next, and we still don't know, so it was time to address this blackmail issue publicly.
On Monday Night Raw the next evening, John Laurinaitis would announce that the WWF is being blackmailed by an anonymous individual who appears to have ties within the RFW organization.
This news was absolutely devastating. There was nothing any of us could do, and we're now worried about our jobs here in the WWF.
I sensed that either a deal had been made with RFW, or they had at least made some sort of agreement. But blackmail? It now made sense why security never intervened in the disruptions at King of the Ring 6.
Anonymous person? We all know this is Tony Cheese pulling the strings. Why else did he go into hiding when all this shit started happening? He simply wants to create controversy and gain more exposure for his company.
I worked in RFW for nearly 7 years. Tony Cheese is known to have done some pretty dodgy things, but this just seemed a bit too far out of his character. Something isn't adding up.
As the WWF would begin to move into a downward spiral of control, we would soon see just how far this anonymous blackmailer is willing to go, and what John Laurinaitis and his executives are willing to do to keep the company alive. This concludes the WWF Documentary, Volume 4, 1996 to 1997, Part 1. Thank you for watching. This has been a WWF paid presentation.